Frankie Ward, or simply Frankie, is one of the best and most well-known interviewers and hosts in esports. She has worked CSGO majors, Dota 2's The International, League of Legends LEC and the Mid-Season Invitational, and the PUBG Global Invitational, among many other tournaments. She has a background in television with the BBC in the UK, and even hosted this year's prestigious BAFTA Awards. She also hosted E4's Games Master, a legacy show which was actually my favourite when I was growing up as a boy. She won the Presenter of the Year award at the UK Esports Awards for 2018. She is known for her humorous banter, her bold approach to putting players' feet to the fire in interviews, and her unique exit interviews, a specialty of hers. I have worked 3 events with her in my career. Sadly, I have also seen her repeatedly denigrate my character online and my speech over year after year after year, despite later exposing herself as an enormous hypocrite who used the lives and well-being of real human beings around the world, but especially in the Middle East, as ammo to score points against tournament organisers that wouldn't hire her and her fellow broadcast colleagues and peers. She also constantly contradicts herself and changes her stories, as you will see in this video. Now, the crux of this video, and why I've made it, is her saying at one point in 2020 and onwards that she wouldn't work with companies owned by Saudi Arabia due to their government's laws and treatment of specific groups of people. The punchline, you can skip it to the end, is she did work with them again and has been paid by them again. So she is not an individual of principles, despite what you will see as I lay out the timeline. She's just someone who's about getting money for herself, despite what the costs may be. She's someone about making petty call-outs, even when she does or will do much, much worse things herself. She never, ever seems to care about if people question her, the notion that that might be legitimate or maybe she's done something wrong. No, in her mind, apparently, they have to do it in a very specific way and very respectfully and often in private, even though she herself repeatedly employs public call-outs and particularly actually people within the esports industry. And quite frankly, just seems like at all costs, she must be in the spotlight. So what I'm going to do here to make this fun is I'm going to actually tell you it a bit like a Tarantino or a Christopher Nolan movie, where we sort of jump around the time frame a little bit, so it changes how you see things, and you get to see it from a certain character's perspective, then you see the whole story. So what we're going to do is, we're going to go from my point of view and my timeline of encountering Frankie, working with her, having back and forth with her, and then some of the things I found out afterwards that had happened before, and then we'll just do the full timeline. And we'll find out just how ridiculously hypocritical, two-faced and disloyal Frankie is. And don't worry, guys, I've got all the receipts and context for you. Because that's the thing, when people try to destroy me with lies and slander and libel, I'll destroy them with the truth and things they said and they did. That's how I operate. So my timeline goes as follows. I first met Frankie Ward at the Stockholm International Esports Awards, arranged by I think it was the Metro newspaper. Interesting detail. It was actually Semler who was like helping them get the people, but basically, and he'll tell you this, I did it all for them, even though one of the women who was operating it then later found out that I was like tangentially going to be invited or something, then tried to like essentially like veto me from being at the event. Someone called Dagny Vibey or something. You'll see she went on to be quite a piece of work herself. But okay, we're not going to get into that in this particular article. I'm talking about in general, if you know the esports industry. So what happened was I went to the event because since I'd helped out in all this way, I was given comped tickets and accommodation and everything. I came to the event. It was held, I think, actually the same night as DreamHack Masters Stockholm 2018 finish, which was the CSGO event. People might remember where infamously North won the event over Astralis, Peak Astralis in the final. They'd beaten them twice in this tournament in best of threes. And MSL, the in-game leader of North, was the Orping IGL, who won the MVP of the tournament over people like Device. So it was one of the most bizarre tournaments ever. It was either the day after or it was the same day, like the night of that particular tournament. And so a whole bunch of us are there, a whole bunch of CS talent. And this was the first time I ever met Frankie Ward. What happened was I was with people like Henry G and Semler and Moses. And she came up, and during the session, what they did is very interesting was, if you were like a VIP, there was like a normal area where the fans could buy tickets and sit. And then there was obviously the stage where they present the awards. Then there was sort sort of like an area down at the front. Think of it almost like an orchestra pit where celebrities and influencers would be hanging around, people from esports, people from the games industry, people from Swedish esports. And Frankie would walk around with a mic doing a bit of crowd work. It's a specialty of hers, by the way. She's actually very good on camera in that sense. And she came up and she interviewed me, seemed to know who I was, and was like, oh, hey, Thorin. Like, essentially, there's a clip, you can go find it somewhere online, where she sort of like asks me a couple of questions. And she asks me one question, like something like, what do I think about Fortnite, which is obviously the big game at the time. And I make a joke, which is what you're seeing on screen here, where I say something like, I've never played that game because I'm not 12 years old. And then I just sort of like deadpan the camera because obviously it's being sarcastic, isn't it? Like, first of all, I haven't played that game, but it's also just not my style of game, is it? I don't really consider that esports. I actually think it's a travesty that Booga guy got to win like PC Player of the Year the next year in 2019 over people like Ziwu, Simple, Caps, I mean, any of the Korean and Chinese League of Legends players. It's absolutely outrageous, wasn't it? So I met her here, seemed nice enough, was very good on camera, didn't think much more of it. After that, it turned out I would actually be working a CSGO event with her. I wasn't even aware she was in CSGO. She was hired as the host on stage, so she was doing the interviews at the Star Series and I-League Season 6 finals. This was the one that was actually won by ENCE in quite surprising fashion. She famously did a very interesting interview with Alexi B there, and that became someone she had sort of a running relationship with and good on-screen chemistry, even though as a Finn, he's a little bit deadpan and people thought you couldn't get much out of him. I actually thought that was where she showcased her skill set as an interview. You can see there, she's the host in the top right. I'm in the bottom left, looking suave as usual, my usual sort of mean mug face, giving off that Thorin heel persona. So we worked the event. I thought, you know what? She's a bit gobby as a woman, but whatever. So am I as a man. It's not the end of the world. It's not a crime, is it? Maybe when you don't know someone that well, you don't talk that much, but okay. That is the nature of doing events. You get in the green room, you say whatever you want, right? Seemed quite eager to do a job, seemed quite enthused about the esports industry. Quite frankly, seemed like she was being quite nice to me. Seemed like she sort of respected me in some ways. So I actually went out of my way at the event to talk to her about some industry stuff and suggest some things or ask how things were going. Then what happened was I got home, and as I am wont to do, I've done it many, many, many times in my career, I did a tweet where I said something like, I want other tournament organisers to hire, and then I tagged her. At the time, it was at Get Frank, not Frankie Ward, at Get Frank, for other events, like she's really good, or she has some talent, or she shows a lot of potential, or something like that. It's something I've done for people like Froscorin and many other people throughout my time in esports. And as you'll see, she replied to the tweet. She said, thanks, Duncan. That means a lot coming from you. Then 2 months later, I found out I was searching for something else, that she'd actually used an acceptance award speech where she was remote and had filmed it. Her speech accepting the award for Presenter of the Year at the UK Esports Awards that year, 2018. But earlier, before I'd worked with her and before I'd been interviewed by her at the Stockholm International Esports Awards, she'd actually used her acceptance speech to call me out directly. And then in doing so, I then later found a Reddit post where someone had even mentioned the top comment when it was announced apparently that I was going to work Star Series Season 6 was Frankie Ward and Thorin on the same event after she said people who defend homophobic language have no place in esport in reaction to Thorin defending more. It's pretty interesting. I found this thing here. I thought, what's going on? I went down. She's even replying. She goes, you hit the nail on the head to this guy here. What I did say was in reference to people thinking the use of discriminatory language is acceptable because it influences a young audience into thinking it's okay. Also, I wouldn't contest that Thorin is far more experienced and a part of the scene than me. That's absolutely right. However, if I was irrelevant, I wouldn't be working. Because I assume someone said, I said that I'm more relevant than her in CSGO. So I looked up what she'd actually said about me. And I couldn't even believe it. I actually couldn't believe it. Like I went on here. By the way, the VOD for this doesn't exist anymore. She said, I want to pledge this right now by saying there is no room for homophobic or racist or misogynist language in the esports industry. The UK is a proving ground for top esports talent, and I therefore think we need to set an example, lead the way, and call out behaviour when we see it. If I say anything wrong, you're welcome to call me out on it too. Let's have that conversation and try and make esports inclusive for all. And then basically, you don't get to see the rest of it, but I can actually remember. She even had a line in it where she just said something along the lines of like, and apparently this individual's a journalist, referring to me in this awards acceptance speech, which in itself is mental, but we'll get to that later. So what happened was, I did a tweet when I noticed this article, and I'd found out what she said elsewhere. I tweeted out the esportsnews.co.uk article that I just showed you before of her acceptance speech. And at the time, you could click the Twitch VOD, which magically doesn't exist anymore, and hear her speech. You can't do it now conveniently. You just get those little parts that are quoted in that article, and that was not the full thing. And when I tweeted it out, I just said something. I didn't even tag her. I just said something about like people attacking me or something. And Moses even replied, lol, was this article written just to find a way to take a very weak shot at you? And I even said, because it wasn't the fault of the journalist, I said, the article's fine. They're just reporting other people taking shots at me. So then Frankie comes in, I think I probably followed her at the time, and goes, remember, this is after I've worked with her and been interviewed by her. She goes, hey, Duncan, we'll send you a message about this. By the way, she never did send me a message about that topic. In fact, she never, ever brought that topic up with me in person or privately unless I referenced it. And then she never in any way tried to actually explain herself in a reasonable manner. She just essentially doubled down. But you know what? Just life sometimes, isn't it? I've had a lot of people do petty call-outs like that and not even attempt to know who I am or what I have to say and slander me and malign me and mischaracterize what I've said and try to arouse people against me and encourage people to try and attack me online. That's just been the way my career's been for, well, long before Frankie came along. Let's put it that way. She'd have been a little girl by the time that stuff started. So after that, I worked 2 more events with her. The next year, I was working at Star Series Season 7, the next season. There you go. I'm the analyst here. She was the interviewer. This was in Shanghai, China. After that, I worked another event with her. I worked ESL 1 New York 2019. As you can see on the group stage broadcast, because we were remote in Cologne, she was the desk host. She was literally my desk host for this event. And I was one of her analysts, and that was the event that we worked together. I even, at this event, went out of my way to help her in a manner I won't outline here, because she was doing her first ESL and she was very nervous about it. And she had big shoes to fill with people like Machine having done it before. And we even had sort of like a second tier crew of sort of replacements because the main crew was out in New York doing the rest of the event for the playoffs, etc. So actually, you might even find, as it says here, when they're talking, someone gives a compliment to Frankie and Sadikist at this event, and she even says, thanks, guys. Used to desk in PUBG a bit, but this is definitely my biggest CS, if not all esports desk I've done. And it was very last minute, but so grateful to get to do my first ESL 1. And the analysts really made me feel comfortable and looked after me. Next desk is DreamHack Rotterdam. So there we go. What a nasty surprise to find, right? And then years later, you're going to see, oh, she's had many other times she slandered me, mischaracterized me, maligned me, said outrageous things, took stances she didn't really believe in, and became ultimately a massive hypocrite. So what I'm going to do now is that was the Christopher Nolan Tarantino sort of version hopping around the time span. So you can see from my point of view how gross that was to have to find out what she was like in that way when she was never in any way like that in person. What a two-faced individual and what a disingenuous individual. Especially, by the way, after the person has not only worked an event with you, you know that they're going to work other events with you. You're not even going to be their desk host at one point in time. You have them on WhatsApp because you worked events with them. You have their phone number. And they've even publicly asked other people to hire you. You're not then ever going to, at any point in time, think, you know what, I should probably reach out to this person and tell them, like, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I did actually say these things about you. I even used a whole awards acceptance speech to call you out personally and even imply I don't know who you are. And basically, yeah, like, you know, I mean, I don't know what you'd say at that point in time. Maybe you'd say you were sorry. Maybe you'd say you're sorry for the way it was done. Maybe you'd say, I wish I'd... You could say all sorts of things. The point is you'd clear the air, wouldn't you? But she didn't. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go in chronological order of all the ways that Frankie first interacted with me and then became a massive hypocrite. And you'll find out how insane it all is. So it all begins with a Twitter thread that had nothing to do with Frankie. In 2018... the famous streamer and former, he wasn't really much of a CSGO pro, he was mainly a CS Source pro, and he was actually a legendary Source pro, one of the best AWPers in Source from North America, Mo, spelt with a zero, who was a big streamer back in the day, especially in CSGO. He basically did a bunch of streams in which he used a word which will absolutely be categorized, especially by Twitch and the terms of service, as a slur against gay people, LGBT, LGBTQ, whatever way you describe it, that's what it'd be described as. And certainly it was in this case. I think he maybe even got Twitch banned or something from it. And he got into a lot of hot water about it. But the problem is, I know players like Mo. In fact, I was actually interviewing and talking to Counter-Strike players from North America as early as 2001, and I already knew some of the Quake players from 1999 and 2000, and I'd actually even played games and pogs and pickups, and I've even stood in for scrims with some of the like low Cal Invite and Cal P level teams. I've actually played with a whole bunch of them and done the pickups at 10 mans and all that crap. And basically, one thing I can tell you is, back then, first of all, there were, I don't think, any openly gay people in the early 2000s in esports. I mean, quite frankly, no one ever talked about their sexuality. Like, it was just like stupid male jokes, maybe, but no one ever really talked about that aspect. It was just gaming. And back then, despite what people now will tell you, they've absolutely attempted to memory hole this. A lot of people would say things like, when you were like coming out, for example, classic example is Dust 2. On Dust 2, T side, you go into B through the tunnels, and when you come out the B entrance, you run onto the site and the platform, and oftentimes someone's sitting in what they call closet, right? It's, in this case, kind of an ironic aspect, but they're sitting there, or it's called car in CSGO, and if you would get shot in the back like that when you were trying to look here, yes, people then would go like, oh, I got gayed, or oh, that's so gay, or whatever. That was a thing back in esports back then. That's what people would absolutely say. And yes, don't worry, they also would call themselves the word aforementioned word I suggested people will say as a slur. They would use that word all the time. I remember first being like, holy, what the? Americans just spamming this all day long. But even so, I actually don't remember anyone thinking like, oh, they're doing it because they actually hate gay people, or they're doing that actually to make fun of gay people. Like I say, it was a very small community back then, and that just was the early internet. The early internet was the Wild West. People were saying all sorts of crazy shit because they never thought they'd be held accountable for it. They never thought it was real. That's why we had said in real life, it wasn't considered real life. It was like going into the Matrix or something, or being inside a video game. No one ever imagined, like, I mean, there was no streams back then, except for the people in the game when you said these things, and I'm not the person saying these things, that's the only people who'd hear it. So actually back then, it really was more used to mean like, sort of, you're a bitch, basically, or you're a fucking loser, or you're weak-willed, or like, what a pussy you are. And a whole bunch of other terms that you will have heard throughout your time in gaming. And so when I saw people like Morse, and by the way, NA scene continued to do that even through CSGO, and this is when CSGO has gotten big. When people like that use a word like that, look, it's stupid to say it on Twitch. It's very, very stupid. I'd also say in the modern day, yeah, be careful. I mean, you don't know who's in this game. You don't know who's watching too. You don't know how they will interpret it. You don't know if they themselves are gay. You don't know if they only know that word as being a slur against them, or a word that was used to hurt them, right? You can't really know these things at all. But one thing I've always hated is tyranny. I mean, in general, in every area of life, but it always starts with language, because if you can't ever say or think certain words, and certain ideas or words become verboten, then it gets so that eventually you can't think certain ideas, and certain things of history get deleted and memory hold. And it was never that, and we were always at war with East Asia. What do you mean? We are now always at war with Eurasia. Like, it's all that crap. And so one thing I always hate is when people basically tell you what you meant by something and what you intended the effect to be. Like, that's one thing no one can know. You can certainly say, like, I don't like this, or you could say, I don't think this should be said, or you could say, I think this should be punished, or you should say, fire the person. You can do all these things, but you cannot know what they think. I hate that mentality. So I'm a classic person where I hate hypocrisy like that, and I hate illogical modes of thinking like that. And so I made a thread. And by the way, the idea I was defending Mo is hilarious, because Mo has mocked me for being autistic many times. He's one of those people who sort of low-key almost implied that he's like beat me up or something. He's been quite rude about me. Now look, he is sort of a wrestling heel himself, so I get it. I've never really had a massive beef with him in that sense. In fact, actually, a couple of years before this, I even outed him for being a bit of a scumbag with a site called CSGO Diamonds, where they were sort of providing him with the roles or something. And it wasn't quite as bad as like fixed stuff elsewhere, but there was some shady stuff going on in that regard. And as a result, when someone says that word only means a slur against gay people, it's like, well, that's just not even the history of the English language, is it? I mean, first of all, in England, to this day, it's a type of food that is still sold to this day. And interestingly, by the way, just as an aside before we get into this, The legendary player Simple, the greatest CSGO player of all time, I'd say the greatest Counter-Strike player of all time, actually famously in the years following this got banned from Twitch a whole bunch of times. He was the biggest CSGO streamer when he would turn his stream on for using the Russian equivalent of that word. And do you know what's hilarious? Do you know why he did it 2 or 3 times? Because the first 1 or 2 times it happened, and I even publicly told him, like, mate, if you keep using that word, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. Like, they're not going to understand what you mean. He basically tried to tell me publicly, like, but that is not what it means in Russia. Like, in Russia, it basically just means like a pussy or a bitch or something. It doesn't actually mean that you hate or are denigrating gay people. And obviously, I was just thinking, like, first time. It's like, yeah, bro, that's literally what happened years earlier. And that's already essentially a battleground that has been ceded and lost. And there's no way back on that one, seemingly, in the current world, right? So I'll just say, by the way, interestingly enough, I've never seen Frankie, who's been to loads of events for Simple, ever call him out for something like that. Or even call him out on a broadcast or do a stream about it. I don't imagine she would ever use an award show or an interview to call him out. So it is certainly interesting the targets that she chooses and who just sort of gets away with it, right? So in my Twitter thread, I say no matter how many times SJW type, social justice warrior, lie and state otherwise, the historical etymology, which is like the history of the word and how it came, where it came from and its root, etc., and the evolution of it, of the word more used is not and has never been explicitly or solely homophobic in meaning. Now, you notice that I never said that it's not homophobic. I never said this word is not homophobic. I said that the etymology, the history of the word, has never been explicitly, as in that wasn't the only obvious meaning that was always there, and it was definitely never only meaning that word. To this day in England, it means a certain type of a foodstuff. Now, obviously, then you judge intent and context. I'm not thinking that more is sort of, a UK foodstuff. I would never suggest as much. In fact, I then give a bunch of suggestions. I also don't think he meant by it, but I do think there's one he did, which is if you go down here, I say, do your research. This is on the 1st of July, 2018. Bundle of sticks, that's one meaning. Food type in the UK. Flighty woman who is fast to anger. Go look up all of these, by the way. I can give a link at the bottom for like a history on this. Weak-willed man. There's one of the ones I would suggest that a lot of these people used it as. Now, they might have been, let's say, not socially aligned to what other people think, or let's say the topical climate of the world and the internet in 2018, if they're thinking everyone's going to take that from it and they can just say it on a giant streaming platform like Twitch with loads of viewers and not get called out. Yeah, I think that's quite silly. Hence why if you go down, I put, if he had said it to, notice I give special caveats and consideration that is never mentioned by people like Frankie and others. If he had said it to someone who is publicly homosexual, so they have outed themselves, and in a manner explicitly insulting them on the basis of his sexuality, then you would have a fringe case whereby you could claim the meaning was clear and unacceptable, certainly. So what I'm saying there is, the meaning is unclear when you don't know the person and what they're referring to. But if they were using it towards someone who is publicly outed themselves as gay, and they're doing it quite clearly to be like, essentially it's a bad thing that's what you are. This is what you are. It's a bad thing, and I'm using it to actually denigrate your sexuality. Then yeah, in that scenario, you could actually say, you know what? There isn't a lot of debate here. There's not really a lot of grey area, right? It's quite clear and unacceptable what you've done. Certainly. Notice I've even explained that in my post, long before any of these people attack me, by the way. So let's go down. I then say it's clearly a word you should avoid solely for the health of your own career. As in, if for no other reason, don't do it just because you're trying to be a streamer, you idiot. You're trying to be someone in esports. Like, I understand, by the way, that all these people are going to say it's not acceptable, fight against it. But that's the point. Even if you think all of the above that I've said is accurate, even if you didn't mean it that way, even if you weren't using it about a gay person or to a gay person, don't do it for the sake of your career, mate. But the tyrants who try to tell you a word only has the meaning they decided, even if they're making it up on the spot or ignoring cultural context and history, can still fuck off. And then I put some reading for those looking for more insight on a similar topic. And basically, if you go to this link here, you will find out there's a concept called the euphemism treadmill, where it explains how terms come in and then they go out. And there's a whole lot of... I'm quite interested in language. Obviously, I'm a writer, I'm a thinker, I'm a talker, Anna. This is quite an interesting topic to me. Now, I didn't know this because at the time, because what happened at the time was there was a beef with Slasher and he was an enormous figure on Twitter. So he was using anything I said like this. He would just say, signal boost it to all of his followers. And he openly says to like, he's causing harm to the industry. Like, he's like, you asshole, like you hate, he would just do all sorts of outrageous things like that. Frankie must have seen that. And she came along and she decided to make her own statements about it. And what she said was as follows. She said on the next day, in July 2nd, 2018, having other people's feelings in mind and choosing not to use language that has been culturally used to persecute others, no matter its original etymology. So she even acknowledges, by the way, the etymology, that there's a history of the word being different, something that everyone's telling me is not the case, doesn't make you become an SJW. So initially she's battling against the idea it makes you a social justice warrior. It's that you've just been educated to be compassionate and considerate of others. It'll be interesting. That concept might come back later, and we'll see how compassionate and considerate Frankie is of others when it really matters. Also, to be described as an SJW does not have to be taken offensively, but is clearly meant to be offensive by those who use it. So now even just saying SJW, I mean, what next? Is that just like a slur for like cool feminist women? So, you know what I mean? You can already sense what taught person this is, by the way. You can call me an SJW all you want, but don't label everyone who speaks for equality as one. It's rational behaviour, not something to be called out. So now you're not even allowed to choose words that have never been slurs to call other people, because Frankie's one of those hall monitor / little girls at like their fucking 12-year-old birthday where it's like, I wanted a pink pony, mummy, not a purple one. I hate you. Like, they're one of these people who think, I get to make all the rules, right? Sammy and George, like, you can't step outside this circle, and then I'm going to be in this one, and then you guys have to run after me and get the tag. You didn't get me. No, it doesn't count. We're starting again. Like, Frankie's one of these people, by the way, and she is the most ridiculous example of a walk scold you will find. As you'll see, right to the bitter end, even when she's totally betrayed all of her principles, her friends, and the people, the group, oppressed groups, as she would call them, that she would claim to stand for, she is still the walk scold to the end. She has the moral superiority, and you're the piece of trash if she's addressing you, the piece of shit, and you should learn like her, because she's some enlightened being who keeps learning, even though she then goes against what she's learned and does exactly the opposite of what she said and promised she will do. She then says, and yes, I've written this after seeing a tweet by a writer, so she's referring to me now, who has decided it's perfectly acceptable to use language that has been used to attack the gay community. Now, remember what I said back in that other post there. Whereabouts here do I say, I even explicitly say, if it's about gay people attacking them, it's not okay. That is when you could claim the meaning is clear and unacceptable, certainly. But then she takes that and she maligns it and mischaracterizes it as, I've said it is perfectly acceptable to use language that has been used to attack the gay community. She's intentionally excluding the context of how I said it. She put, they have previously attacked women. What the fuck does that mean, attacked women? By the way, by her logic, she's attacking a man right now. So if someone said she attacks men, I'm sure she would be like, no, I actually called them out, or I attacked them in like the most literal dictionary definition, verbally or metaphorically, but she isn't doing it that way. She's saying they have attacked women, and by the way, she's doing it right after talking about language used to attack the gay community, the context being in the context they're gay. So she's also trying to imply, basically, that I've attacked women just for being women, and that I'm a bigot / a misogynist. This is already the opening gambit from this individual who I'm about to work with in the story. This behaviour feels like the acts of someone in fear of fairness. Now, at the end of this video, and when you've heard all the story, you tell me, do you think I'm in fear of fairness? Or am I more fair than Frankie Ward, who ends up just being a hypocritical, two-faced slime ball who just does whatever they want for money in Spotlight and gets to call anyone out any day they want and still behave any way they want, even if they do the same or worse than they claim that person did and that person may never have done? After this, someone points out that, why doesn't everyone just block me? Why don't, to be honest, you should just block Thorin if you don't care for his insight into esports, because all the other things he's saying is him trying to be edgy. So Frankie, this was a day later, says blocking is one thing, but he's saying this attitude is okay. I absolutely did not. I actually explained not to say it for the health of your career. I think it's totally clear and unacceptable if you say it in the context of being about gay people. But again, she's going to malign and mischaracterize me because she is not an honest person. She is not a principled person, as you will find out the longer the video goes on. And she put, and it's scary that some people may believe him. By the way, I'm giving my opinion. What, they believe my opinions? What the fuck are you talking about? We're not talking about like facts and shit like that, mate. Then she put, it's important that people set him straight. There we go. There's the line, isn't it? Because that's what Frankie's going to do to me and a lot of other people in the years coming, set us straight. But then when she fucks up, we're not allowed to set her straight like that. And we're definitely not allowed to mischaracterize it, which I never do or ever did once. I've got all the receipts. So as I said before, in 2018, she won the Presenter of the Year award at the Esports UK Awards. And she used her speech, which was here, to call me out. Now, Mo said all this stuff here. You can read that if you want. And I said my thing. You notice they didn't quote all the rest of it, but okay. Frankie said her things. And as I mentioned before, she also said this weird line where she said something like, apparently he's a journalist. Now, the reason why that was interesting to me already is because it gave me the sense that this person is very disingenuous. Because when I looked elsewhere, I found actually a post years later where she was talking about her CSGO streaming experience. And down here, she put, I did watch CS before I became part of the broadcast team, by the way, just to clarify. But of course, I know way more now because I get to work with the experts. I'm very fortunate. Now, the reason that's very convenient is, I told you the first event she works with me is Star Series Season 6, right? And that event was the one that she got hired for. But I'd actually worked the previous, I think, 2 or 3 Star Series events. So by that logic, she'd never seen Star Series. Or she wouldn't know that I'm not only a journalist, I'm actually an analyst in Counter-Strike. I'm a many different things. And it's not, apparently, it's just she doesn't know who I am. Which is it? Are you watching the broadcast? Are you not? So already you're sort of seeing the sort of person she is and how, as time goes on, the story just changes the facts and the history and who said what and where they were. And did she know that or did she not know that? Did she actually say that? Did she not say that? What did she? And then she's one of these people, reminds me of modern politicians. She doesn't know there's like, you can record the stuff. You can just look on the internet and look up old stuff. It's like she thinks the live speech to the live audience. Well, I can't look it up now, so they have to just believe whatever I'm saying. I can just be fast and loose with the truth all I want, can't I? By the way, as I said, conveniently, the broadcast VOD of that acceptance speech and the clips just deleted off the internet, aren't they? It's weird how that works. This is only after I'd called her out over it a bunch of years later. Interesting detail, actually presenting the award that they went back to at the award show because she was remote, one of the people was that guy Scoundrel from League of Legends. And do you know what? When he also echoed her sentiments, calling me out, I actually just went on his Twitter account and I did an advanced search, and you wouldn't believe what word I found Scoundrel had used towards his friends a couple of years earlier on multiple occasions. But you know what? This isn't a video about Scoundrel unless he decides to fuck with me. So then after that, Frankie worked what I think was her first CSGO event, which was the America Minor for Face It, London Major. And even after that, before she worked with me at my first event with her, Star Series Season 6 in like October or whatever, she kept calling me out in other senses. There was another thing I said otherwise about some conspiracy guy. She just comes in that thread, August 14th. She goes, refreshingly, there's loads of commenters on the original thread calling him out. She loves that people are calling me out directly on a thread to me. Let's watch out for that when what she considers it when people come and call you out directly on a thread to you. She calls it abuse, by the way. She calls that attacking women. But oh, she's loving it. It's refreshing that so many people are calling me out directly. Also, there are a few of us who do point out this behavior isn't acceptable. Oh, it's not acceptable. What are you going to do about it? If you don't accept it, what are you going to do about it? Presumably, you're implying, by the way, I have to get the fuck out of esports, so I should be fired. That's basically the implication when you say that. It's just our voices aren't as amplified. I'm trying to get people to call each other out respectfully, as though what she just did with totally Milan and mischaracterizing was respectful. Trying to get people to call each other out more often. Interesting detail. She wants people to call people out. Well, isn't that interesting, right? Because you'll find out later she can't live up to those words. Then, as I said, I went to the Stockholm International Esports Awards arranged by Metro newspaper or whatever. She interviewed me there, made the Fortnite joke. It's all good. As I mentioned earlier, Star Series Season 6 rolls around. She gets hired, I get hired. They say the thing here about, wow, what's going to happen now when... Notice this guy even just says Thorin defending more. But she called out the idea of defending homophobic language. He just says Thorin defending more. Not even true, really. You can just say, essentially, I was saying, I think he was mischaracterized. I don't know that that's what he meant. I'd have to ask him to find out. Then she says her comment about how all she did was call out, people thinking the use of discriminatory language is acceptable and all the rest of that jazz. As I say, we work the event together. She's the interviewer. I say, I hope she gets hired more. She basically says, thanks. I noticed the Esports UK article about her and her call out. She says she'll send me a message. She never does. After that, we work Star Series Season 7 in China. Later on, we work ESL New York remotely from Cologne. I even help her out in that one. She acknowledges that analysts made her very comfortable, even though it was a big deal, the biggest event in esports she'd ever worked at that point in time. She's already someone who slandered me and been shitty to me, and I still go and help her like that, because that's how fucking legit I am, by the way. I even will let bygones be bygones and give people a couple of chances if they seem like they have their heart in the right place, and maybe they were just silly or they did the wrong thing. But you know what? If I notice repeatedly a certain pattern of behaviour, then you know what? I'm not just going to let you come and ruin the life of some 18-year-old kid coming in with esports, or go and say that someone else like shouldn't be able to do this, that and the other, when I can just call you out. You know what? I'll take care of you in that regard. I'll make sure that someone actually calls you out and puts your bullshit on record. So after that, interesting detail, I worked with Blast again in early 2020. In January and February, I was part of the Blast Premier Spring group stage, or whatever it was called, before we all had to go online. It was people like me and Semler and Sponge. And what happened was, she wasn't hired to work this event. She'd actually worked with Blast the previous year, including on the global finals in Bahrain, as we'll get to later. But they hadn't hired her, actually, to work at this event. And so I came along. I was at this event working, and she came along, because I think she lives around London. It's in London. It was on like the Isle of Dogs or whatever. It was around that area. Actually, that was maybe where we were staying. It was somewhere in London. She came along anyway, sniffing around the event, talking to people, talking to the organisers. By the way, I got the absolute vibe, and if you know her privately, I think you'd know what I mean, that she was actually angling, like, to sort of be like, hey, remember me? Or like, hey, I live here, you know, I'm close by, like, maybe hire me for the next season. And I could tell she just wanted to be hired in the future, which is going to be quite key in a minute, right? A few months later, at the end of May, she worked an event called Gamers Without Borders. This is when we had to go online. And this is an event where I'm just going to show you. Look, she's up here. She's the host. Got a whole bunch of really big talent. Has a bunch of big teams. And they're all giving money away to charity, right? Look how much money, like 750,000, 500. This sounds like a really great initiative, doesn't it? Let's just have a look, though, who actually is arranging this. So it's arranged by ESL, okay? The sponsor is the Saudi Ministry of Sport. Saudi Arabia. If you go and look up, by the way, that's basically literally what it looks like. Saudi Arabia, the country, through the Ministry of Sport, is funding this event. That's the sponsor. And she works the event. Oh, and by the way, she had a history of working with interesting Middle Eastern countries. Because as I said, she'd worked the previous year with Blast. Like at their global finals, which were in December of 2019, the previous year, she was the interviewer at an event that took place in Rifa, which is in Bahrain. Another country you can go and look up. What are their attitudes towards gay people, towards women, etc. We'll just establish a track record of who she works with and who she'll take money from at this point in time. Now, that'll be key when we get to her later statements that she makes. But before then, don't worry, she finds a way to call me out again. What happens is the next year, in 2020, we have this thing, the NEOM LEC incident, where what happened was LEC announced right, I think a day or two after Pride Month ended, that LEC would be sponsored by NEOM, which is like a futuristic city being built by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where basically it's clearly like angle, like a tourism angle, etc. And it turned out that there might even have been a component of how this city was being built that involved actually genociding people who lived on that land. There was some weird story of like a chieftain or something you can go look up. Now, Richard Lewis did some fabulous reporting on this. He actually showed that basically behind the scenes, what happened was the LEC talent publicly actually basically said some things, did some tweets sort of saying this is unacceptable. And behind the scenes, apparently they got together and did a boycott and sort of said like, we won't do the next day of LEC if this happens. Now what happened was LEC decided to cancel the NEOM sponsorship, sort of say, our bad, put it out there that it wasn't going to happen. The talent looked like the heroes. They'd saved the LEC from being sponsored by, in their words, I would assume evil people who don't care about LGBT people. And they were hailed as heroes. I even said myself, like, yeah, they took a stand. Okay, they put their jobs on the line. But on a show, before we knew that they'd succeeded, I actually was asked by Dom on the crackdown, something like, what do you think about this? And I said, the problem is, because I'd seen the way Froscorin tweets about a lot of topics, and she had many topics she's called people out on and never called them out by name. Just said vaguely, this racist hiring procedures, or like, I've heard of people not getting hired because they were black or women or gay, or like, oh, someone within the LEC made a really uncomfortable working with it. And they go, who Froscorin? Anyone she doesn't work with Riot or LEC anymore, she won't tell you. She won't say say who it is. She doesn't do it. So I thought, you know what, it's the same thing again. So I said, I knew Froscorin years ago. I actually helped her career and helped sort of put her over in wrestling terminology, or put her on in hip-hop terminology, and did shows with her. There was one point in time where she wasn't hired by Riot, so I did a whole show to showcase what an expert she was about Chinese League of Legends. She's someone I had a lot of affection for and promoted quite heavily for years and years, until she turned against me a couple of years before this. So basically, I speculated, but I'll speculate that someone like Froscorin, though, it seems like actually why they do the tweet, a bit like a politician, is to not have to do something about it. You just do the tweet, and then you don't actually say you'll like definitely quit. And basically then, if it goes ahead, you just go, well, what can I do? I called it out. But if it gets cancelled, you can also go, see, now that I know it's cancelled, like, yeah, I'd never have accepted that. Now, it turns out apparently behind the scenes, yeah, maybe they did all get together. Maybe that is part of why it was cancelled. Richard Lewis's reporting, though, says basically that the people from Riot Global who came over to the European LEC people who'd done the deal just communicated to them, oh, by the way, this deal's not, there's no problem with it. Like, this deal is okay. It's just you didn't time it and message it correctly, which is the opposite of what people think publicly. And by the way, if you hear that as talent, you've got to go back in, haven't you? Because they're saying it's okay. But no one cared about that. Because Richard Lewis is banned from the League of Legends subreddit, so they could all pretend the story didn't exist, just like they did with the E.G. Daddy thing. And they could listen to any old waffle and any old rewriting of history and retconning and memory holding of whatever they like. So when Froscorin decides to claim that she's deeply saddened by the latest episode of Crackdown, where my integrity and principle is called into question through speculation, let me clear it up. The on-air talent declined to appear on broadcast until the deal was revoked. I did put my fucking job on the line. Well, fair play to you, as I said on Twitter. Then this guy, who's I think it's from Richard's Discord server, goes, for people who want the context, Thorin is a person who has stopped working with business partners over moral issues. So he speculated, in his own words, that he was cynical and unfortunately, that Frosk only tweeted out and then did nothing else. In his opinion, she should have quit. I do agree with that, by the way. You don't wait and then go, right, now that they've quit, I'll tell everyone. Now that they didn't do the deal, I'll tell everyone I would have quit. No, what you do is you say, right, look, if this deal goes ahead, you publicly tweet it, I will quit. I will not work on LEC. That way you put maximum pressure on them. And then, by the way, if they go ahead and work with them, it's against your principles, you really care about it, you quit. That's what you do. That's how you do it. I know, because I did do this. Earlier this year, I said publicly, because ESL, when they reformulated Pro League to battle Flashpoint, an org I was working with, a different tournament organizer, they just took a bunch of slots, particularly from NA teams that were in Pro League, a league you had to qualify into, and that teams used to use as part of their marketing pitch to sponsors, and essentially was considered like owned by the players and the team. They took those and just gave them to bigger orgs and better teams that weren't in Pro League, that they just wanted to be in it to make their league better than Flashpoint, and basically to fuck over Flashpoint. And they fucked over the players, and the Players Association did nothing about it. And so I actually said, I will never work with ESL, who I already had writing work like of $1,000 already scheduled, and they'd already sent me an RFP for which events I wanted to work that year. All the past years, back to 2016, I'd worked 1 or 2 events with them, including events like ESO and Clone, their big flagship event. And I said I won't work with them in any context, writing, content, majors, Cologne at Katowice, etc. I don't work at Katowice anyway, until the people who made this decision to steal the spots are named and shamed or fired, I think was what I said, or leave the company. One of those things. And that's why, to this day, I've never worked with ESL. I probably will never work with them again. Now, that's a pretty interesting thing. By the way, later on, you'll see I also come out against the Neon thing. But okay, out comes Frankie, because how dare this person suggest I have morals and I've done something right? She hasn't even been tagged here. She just goes, Thorin is a person who says he has stopped working with business partners over moral issues. But what were those moral issues? It's already on the internet, you bozo. I've got a way bigger Twitter account than you. There's threads about it. How about do some fucking research? And you used to be something of a journalist or whatever when you worked. When you were apparently a journalist, when you worked with the BBC. Go fucking look it up. Have a little Google search, you cretin. And she goes, if one of the most prominent LGBTQ plus voices, by the way, for people like Frankie, if you're a woman or you have coloured skin or you're in any way gay, you're just like some sacred saint, by the way. You're just above the rest of us and your voice matters so much more. If one of the most prominent voices we have in esports gives up that voice rather than stays to enforce change, then does that help more? Ooh, interesting. So if you're a prominent voice who can speak out against something and you could, rather than enforce change, enforce, presumably through your labour, and your voice, does it help more to not do that? Well, let's come back to that later, shall we? Because interestingly enough, if you go down, she goes here, she says, what the Frosk and the LEC talent team did was show that working together and standing up for what is right can work and can set an example. I have learned so much in the past few days. I'm not proud of everything I've done in esports. They've taught me I must do better. Ooh, this is big. Okay, let's see, by the way, if she ever did do better, if she did actually learn not to work with people like Neom, Saudi Arabia, etc., like people who have these perspectives on LGBTQ plus people. By the way, little detail, this didn't happen until 2022, but since this, by the way, this is going to be key for what Frankie later does and what her claims is why she has to earn money from the Saudis is, I actually turned down millions of dollars in investment from the exact same Savvy Gaming Group, public investment fund, Saudi Arabian people that bought ESL and fund the events Frankie worked and has since worked to fund my company, which my company needed. And to this day, my company has yet to be fully funded, and it's actually running off other things and success in other areas. So I have put my money where my mouth is. I have spoken about what I think is morally fucked up when people's integrity has been questionable, and I will not work with characters like that. I have refused to work with ESL, who does like 70% of the calendar and has done most of the majors, the world championships in CSGO history. I've worked the most world championships of majors of any CSGO analyst. You think I don't want to work more of them? I don't want to be part of these giant events. Of course I do, but there are things that matter more to me, so I will give up legacy and working those events. I will give up the money that I would earn, sometimes $20,000 an event. I will give up even the fact that you would say, like, in some ways it's a reward for how good I am at my job, to the status of being called up, etc. I'll give all of that up and millions of dollars in investment to run a company doing things the way I want in order to actually show I can't fuck with that. Because the key thing for me is this. It's one thing if a company like that invested in a hedge fund or an overall fund that then invested in you and you didn't necessarily know who's in that. You might not be able to know who's in that. You can't do anything about that. Yes, money can be dirty and it all circulates. But I'm not going to directly take the money from the people I think are fucked up. I'm not going to do that. That's a bridge too far. There's no layer of abstraction. There's not even plausible deniability. You know you're taking that money from them. You know what they do, and you're happy with that. You're thinking that is acceptable, and your behavior, whether you call them out or not, is co-signing it to some degree because you are taking it. If you're someone who also calls out other people for their principles, their morals, what it says about them to work with people, and you've made stances that you wouldn't work with them. That's a key detail here, as you'll find out a little bit later. Because then comes the dreaded post that ruined it all for Frankie, which is on August 5th, the CSGO talent did their own version of the LEC talent thing. What happened was, behind the scenes, a bunch of them, I did it publicly in a tweet, but then eventually, like, Moses did like an open letter to them or whatever. Because behind the scenes, we're all trying to contact Blast, and they just kept fobbing us off and saying there was no answer yet. Because Blast, it turned out, was also going to take a Neom deal a few months after the LEC, because Blast really needed it. Apparently, it was going to be like the biggest deal they'd ever signed. And if you know how much money ESL had compared to them, they needed this money to potentially stay afloat and to keep doing well. So we all said we won't work with them. And we sort of group boycotted this event. People like me, Harry, there was a whole bunch of people, Vince, Frankie, Moses, there was a whole bunch of people said things about this and whether they would work the event or not. So Frankie came out and said publicly, she listed a thing called the HumanDignityTrust.org and says maps of countries that criminalize LGBT people. She said, the Blast X, so Blast/cross Neom deal is an opportunity to educate ourselves so that we no longer work with people who would kill our friends. So the implication is she has gay, and we have gay friends. These people, Neom, Public Investment Fund, Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, would kill our gay friends. So we have to educate ourselves to not work with people who would kill our gay friends. Keep that energy and keep that in mind for the rest of this fucking video. Because then let's go down here. She's talking about this here. She says she's sorry for all of this. This person says, like, Neom's being built on this. Like, she says, on the blood of the Huaytat tribe. And she says, definitely not forgetting that either. I just want to signpost that it isn't just Saudi Arabia that punishes LGBTQ plus people. Then she puts down here, I think you just used your freedom of speech. Executing people because they are gay is not freedom of speech. It is in contravention of human rights. She was directly implying that they execute gay people and that they have human rights violations in Saudi Arabia. She then later says, I'm reminding people that some countries actually criminalize people to the point of a death sentence for not being straight. These are very, very bold words. This is a way bolder stance, by the way, than even the LEC talent took. Someone goes, if you think inhibit putting an embargo at the esports industry of an entire country's population is the right thing to do, this is key. The context of how she explains this, what she's later going to say about Saudi Arabia and about face and try and go the opposite direction. But I've met some fantastic players from Saudi Arabia, but NEOM is a government-funded scheme and the government make the laws. She's directly drawn a chain of connection of cause and effect. That because it's the government and the government's laws, that's why you can't even work with any scheme of theirs in any context. I am not against the people of Saudi, but some of their laws criminalise innocent people. Now what happens is, there was a thread on Reddit saying Frankie won't work with Blast while they're sponsored by NEOM. So in she comes to the thread and she says something very interesting. She starts talking about how she had worked in the past at like Bahrain, but then that's Blast, but then she wasn't hired for the next season of Blast. Interesting. She wasn't hired for the next season of Blast. And now, so she worked with Blast when they hired her for Bahrain, and then she worked with Games Without Borders. And then now she won't work with Blast, who won't hire her for this year because they're working with sort of similar people. That almost sounds like sour grapes. That almost sounds like you're using the fact they didn't hire you to say, right, well, you know what? Fuck you then. I'm not going to work with you, even though you're not hiring me. And it's because you associate with people who would kill my gay friends, our gay friends. They just criminalise people. If you're just not straight, they execute you there. That's fucking outrageous, by the way, if you ever about face and work with those people. And more importantly, if it was just as a poker chip to put on the table and push all in and try and force Blast to fold their hand because you wanted to work with them and punish them for not working with you. That's a bit dark to me. So then you keep going down. She keeps commenting on some other stuff here. This is a great line. But if Saudi wants to make money from tourism, so like, you know, doing things like sponsor ESL and buy ESL and other things that we're about to do in the future, that would be a way to cause tourism because they're going to have some of their finals in Riyadh, etc., then obviously you'd need to not do that because, think about this, they also need to change their laws on homosexuality. So if they want tourism, they need to change their laws on homosexuality. But not if they want Frankie to work for events which are run by companies they own, right? She then says in another Reddit comment, I didn't see myself as a big name. It was my first year of doing regular CS. When you're on camera, it's very scary turning down jobs because you fear you not being hired again. That's not an acceptable excuse for attending the Bahrain event at this point. And I admit to that too. She admits that just because you're scared of getting turned down jobs and not having work, that's not an acceptable excuse for attending. And she admits that. You absolutely don't have to accept that, and that's fine. I've stated that I'm going to try and do better in the choices I make in the future, and that's what I intend to do, regardless of what people may think. Then in another comment, she says, and I don't like people calling me a bitch. I mean, that is beyond the pale, obviously, but that's what you insinuated by calling me a mot. I posted a link sharing some information and have said I do not want to work in places / with places that discriminate against LGBTQ+. Call it virtual signaling if you want. I just want to do the right thing. It doesn't make me a mot. So she says she does not want to work in or with places that discriminate against LGBTQ+. So at this point, you must understand that there's no way she's going to be working with any company owned by Saudi Arabia. It just can't happen at this point in time, guys, right? Because it would be absolutely outrageous if she in fact did do that after seeing all of this. We can all acknowledge that, right? Well, what's that? More comments. She goes, for full disclosure, when asked about Gamers Without Borders, she just worked that same year, it was part of a charity project called Gamers Without Borders. And I did an interview with Prince Faisal, who is the head of SAFEIS, Saudi, whatever, I'm assuming something fund, right? Now, she even did an interview with one of the Saudi princes. Man alive, so promoting them essentially. Then says, I signed up to interview people, but then I ended up interviewing charities and also Prince Faisal. I also desk hosted an episode where the weekend was CS. The event was supported by Saudi. I was recruited by and worked directly with the production team, who were not Saudi. Suddenly, that's okay, right? As all my work was cancelled, because this is the online year, so because her work was cancelled, I made the decision to do the event. I can't turn back time, unfortunately. If I'm in the same situation again, I won't make that decision again. As I've mentioned numerous times on this thread, I have made mistakes and I'm going to make better choices moving forward and try to use my voice in a positive way. Interesting, right? So basically, the reason she took the event, which it sounds like, she kind of knew she probably shouldn't, is because, oh, that's right, the rest of her work got cancelled. I thought fear of not getting hired for events doesn't make it acceptable. So because her work got cancelled, she just did the event anyway. So it was never about principles or people or gay friends, as we will then find out. That was irrelevant. She just didn't have any work. It was the online era, so fuck it. Do the event, even if it means literally interviewing some of the people you're claiming set the terms of the government that then play out with your gay friends that are in the Middle East, including countries like Saudi Arabia. Do you see some of the problems we're going to get into later on in this fucking video? Then, as if that isn't outrageous enough, in another post, someone says, might be a little different angle because every single member of the on-air broadcast team for the LEC refused to work if the sponsorship remained. Blast has the option of just hiring other people. They already had hired other people. She wasn't working with them anyway. That's why it's such a disingenuous, fucked up chip to play. They go, so you're going to need all the tier 1 to 3 casters to say no, I think. And she says, that is a good point. I don't know where most other casters stand. Oh, so she hasn't gone and made it a group thing. And no, she's just battling with her little chip against Blass, who hasn't hired her. It was reported that I had a contract on an esports website today, but I wasn't due to work their next season, so she admits it herself. I did have another project with them under discussion, but told them I couldn't proceed if it was in partnership with Neom. I think she was going to do Blast Rising, the second tier event or something, or maybe a female event or something. Maybe it was Valorant later in the year, who knows. This is a banger. I don't think I have as much to lose as other people for speaking out. So when she doesn't have work, she'll do the event. But then later, when she's a bit safer and she thinks, well, I don't have much to lose compared to other people, I'll speak out about this. So essentially, if she does have enough to lose, she won't speak out about it. And apparently, as you'll later find, she'll just work with those people again, directly. Now, the next year, I actually never knew she worked Gamers Not Borders. I don't watch fucking charity tournaments. I was on Wikipedia one day and I was looking someone up and I found there was this event that had an enormous prize pool, but it was all going to charity with Navi and FaZe. And so I went and I put this screenshot of her working there and showing, lol, that the sponsor is the Saudi Ministry of Sport. You can see it in this smaller version. And I just put, imagine working this event, this is a year after, and then trying to lecture others online about your politics and what good behaviour is. Because if you don't know, even after the whole Saudi thing, she continued to lecture other people about politics and how they behave. And her feed is always about UK politics, how everyone's a scumbag who's conservative and they're all pieces of shit and all that. Oh, it's outrageous. And so I say, check the timestamp, the event date and timestamps, that when she was saying, I'm someone who hasn't worked with companies because of morals, that she's doing a couple of months after she herself worked with the Saudis. That's mental. And I say, you're skin in the game, do so. And I make some little jokes about it too, because fuck her, right? Now, she then comes in, subtweets me, because I have her blocked already, and says, last year, I openly admitted I made mistakes in a couple of events I worked, Blast Bahrain, Gamers Without Borders, and said we should use Neom as an example of who not to work with. Keep that in mind for later on. Thorin, if you'd like to actually talk to me, then talk to me rather than subtweeting. You have my number. Same number she never ever used to contact me to ever clear the air about the things she said about me. By the way, she has my number. Why isn't she contacting me? That's it. Because she's the princess and you have to contact her. She runs Esports. She makes up the rules as she goes. How dare you just have your own opinions and do what you think is acceptable? Then she says down here, the reason this has suddenly re-emerged was because I spoke out when he attacked Frostcore, and she's reading my mind now, for speaking out against the LEC/Neom deal. Didn't attack her, I just said I think she was cynical in what she was doing, and if she really wants to make a stance, you say you'll quit publicly before you know whether your job's safe or not. And yes, I was a hypocrite because of the jobs that I did, so she was a hypocrite, she admits it. But I said I would be different moving forward. And so far, I have been. The word so far are doing so much heavy lifting, guys. I think she really knew eventually she'd work with them again. I think she knew the right deal would come along. I think actually she was someone who understood, you can't avoid it forever. That's why she's phrasing it and couching it. She's no longer saying, I'll never work with them. She's put, I said I would be different moving forwards, and so far I have been. So give me credit for not having been hired to an event and not working with them. I want credit for that, even though surely I'd already be tested when I again get offered, right? I do not tell people how to live their lives. Are you fucking kidding me, love? Go listen to the rest of this video. But I do challenge things I believe to be unfair. And I believe it is unfair for someone to publish accusations when I am not able to respond directly on the same forum on account of them blocking me. So now blocking her and then making accusations is unfair because she can't respond directly. And then she says, anyway, usually I don't comment on stuff like this. I just ignore it. However, I just think sometimes things should be dealt with directly. And hey, I didn't deal with it directly last year. So Duncan, I'm sorry I didn't call you out to your face and I didn't know I'd upset you. If you can believe that at this point in time, I've got a bridge over Brooklyn to sell you guys. But anyway, that thing about how outrageous it is to make accusations when you got someone blocked. I don't complain about blocks, but I do keep receipts. So do you know what, guys? See if you can believe it. I'm blocked by Frankie. And I've been from, I think, 2021. And she's made all sorts of accusations and comments about me, but I'm blocked. I can't reply to her directly. Now, I don't have a problem with that. Also, notice on my blocked screen how different mine is from other people's blocked screen of me or other people. So what you see is down here in the bottom left, you can see it's the Thorin account. I'm proving, actually, that this is my account as long as I didn't doctor the image. That is blocked by Frankie. They just put the middle part of the screen that says you're blocked with no clue as to whose account it was. Let me just think, guys. You know all those bazillion people who say they were blocked by me for nothing, never even talked to me. You are aware they could just download one screenshot of one person like this and anyone could post it. And if it became a famous thing, it got you clout. And then other industry idiots replied, I'm blocked by him too. He's crazy. He blocks us all. Probably just for existing and being women. They could just do it and fake it. This isn't evidence in any context. Anyone can get that screen. It doesn't even say anything except someone at one point was blocked by Thorin. In this case, I was blocked by Frankie Ward. Just interesting how she never is able to keep the same story. Now, keep all that thing about blocking people, keep it in mind and about what she says about Saudi Arabia, because don't worry, in 2021, she's still got that same energy, boys. So if you go down here, I made a tweet where I said, basically, I made a joke. I put, apparently, Frankie won't be working this year's Gamers Without Borders event. They couldn't match her blood money day rate, so she went with the rival, lesser known, Profits Without Principles event. Ha ha ha, boom, boom. So if you go down, some guy comes along and starts to sort of criticise Frankie over it, basically. And then he says, are you okay? Also, the same thing you accused Thorin of for some benign comments to people in her comments. Get fucked, I assume, because she's blocked people, basically. But you can also can't see who she's blocked. Everyone can play that game, can't they? Then she replies and goes, for the record, I block very few people. However, when I've clearly stated my position and someone is going to say I'm irredeemable, their mind is already made. By the way, she can block whoever she wants, including me. And I don't want to waste my time or energy on their replies. Yeah, perfect. That's why you block people, not for the silly reason you tried to suggest earlier about me blocking you. Maybe I don't want to waste my fucking time and energy on your shit replies and the dog shit way you behave towards me. And she put, same to people who say I work with murderers. Because remember, she's not working with them at this point in time. But she called them murderers herself. Then she says, there are plenty of people who are still working on Gamers Without Borders, and I don't blame them for doing so. It's a charity event where money goes to very established organisations. If I had, ready for some credit that she wants, if I hadn't spoken out about Neom, would I have people in my mentions accusing me of terrible things? No. I mean, I think you would for other reasons, but let's say on that one, we'll take your premise. But I decided I wasn't comfortable with previous decisions for now. If people didn't speak out, we would have had Neom sponsoring 2 huge eSport tournament brands, because obviously they would have sponsored Blast and LEC. And you know what? The potential Twitter abuse makes that worth it. But I am entitled to block it. So she's again, by the way, implying that they're murderers and that you're talking about her working with them, and she hasn't. And that because of her, they're not sponsoring massive brands. Do you know the irony of that statement? They now own outright ESL, a massive company who she later works with, and they own Faceit, one of the main gaming website platforms to play Counter-Strike on, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Ah, isn't that interesting, eh? Let's keep track of Frankie's principles, shall we? Then, less than a month later, in fact, something like just over a week later, she calls out a guy, and I thought this was so interesting, because this guy here, Chris Metzen, is a guy who worked with Blizzard, and basically, it was where that whole scandal came out about, like, they'd been rude and sexist towards women, and one of the things this guy said within his statement was about how he had daughters, and that was like the grounds to which he explained that, you know, he does care about women and women not being oppressed and he wouldn't want them to be treated that way. So Frankie calls him out publicly, literally embeds his tweet, just says, I have daughters, and just sort of like a looking away and was like, nah, oh, I have daughters. Well, don't worry though. She goes on to explain more. She gets quite explicit. The good thing about someone like Frankie is she tells on herself if you give her time. She's mega fucking gobby and the brain isn't connected to her mouth always. She goes, to people replying, annoyed that I've pointed out a man mentioning his daughters in an apology about the abuse women suffered at his workplace, be annoyed. His statement didn't have to mention his personal life because this is about a business he was part of the senior leadership of. When those senior members of Blizzard openly mocked a woman who asked for less sexualized characters in WoW in a video from 2010 that was widely shared, if you go and look, the context is quite different to that, their daughters didn't come into it. So why now? Now, here's what's interesting about that. She says that he didn't have to mention his personal life because this is about business. And why mention it now? So let's hope at no point involving her business decisions does she ever mention her family or, Lord forbid, a daughter as some sort of, well, we'll see, maybe a shield would be the phrase people might use. So then we go down here. Is this the new, I'm not racist, I have black friends? This is going to be really interesting. Frankie says, I think it's from a similar family of excuses. So it's an excuse to reference your daughter in that context when they're not directly someone working at the event with you, presumably, or involved in the case. Then if you go down, he put, I'm not mocking him. I'm rolling my eyes at the stock response of, I have daughters and I'm not ruining anything here. Don't be ridiculous. Then a guy goes, what is he supposed to say? Literally everything he could say now could be used against him. Shaking my head. She says, I didn't remark on the entire statement, just the inclusion of his daughters in the statement. I have seen other men wield the women in their lives as excuses and or a shield, and I'm tired of it. Yeah, I'm tired of that too, Frankie. People taking gay people and coloured people and women and just using them as a shield to not be criticised for your own bullshit. And then later, tossing that shield aside and not even caring about them or ever standing up for them. Then she says, yeah, I saw... Because this guy even said, but we shouldn't need a special connection to women in our lives in order to protect them, to listen to them, to give them space. And she says, yeah, I saw. So in other words, don't mention your daughters then. She then explains, the point is not yours. You're replying to a point I have made, which is that a man has used the existence of his daughters in an apology. He did not have to mention them. It is a form of emotional manipulation. Ooh. Ooh. It's emotional manipulation to use your daughter as a shield like that. Just don't mention them. Why mention them now? Well, that's going to get really fucking interesting later, so keep that one in the old box, and we'll come back to that, shall we? Because then there's just a little bit more house cleaning to take care of, which is... I did a tweet where I said about her being a walk scold, and I pointed out she is someone who has who single-handedly made green rooms less welcoming to be in and has colleagues walking on eggshells instead of enjoying the games/gig. Because she was talking about how Semler's, like, you know, hasn't used his voice in the right way, etc. Now, that is something I can tell you I was told by numerous people, and I told Frankie it to her face at ESL New York, that a bunch of people in that room and in general had told me that they hated being in green rooms with her, that when she would bring up politics or she would try and berate them or lecture them, kind of like Froscorin does. I've heard Froscorin's always the walkest person in the room, even in the bloody G4 room, for fuck's sake. I think of some of the lunatics who work there. Now, we used to have the coolest vibe ever. The whole point was you're in the green room, you're off air, you let off some steam, you have some fun watching the games, you talk shit on the players if you want, you talk shit on each other, you have some banter. It's like being in the pub. It used to be so fun. But when Frankie was there, it was like you were on camera. It was like it was in public. It was like she was calling you out. It's like, oh, for who? It's just us here. What's going on? And she would try and nitpick every little thing, and oh, it was ridiculous. And other people came to me and they just told me privately, like, oh, you know, I know she thinks I'm friends with her and I behave that way, but actually, like, I'm quite nervous about what to say around her, and I feel like she's trying to call me out and pick up on everything I'm saying, and it's just like, yeah, look, watch out when you're in the green room with her. You can't just do like we normally do. We can't just have jokes, etc. That was a whole bunch of people. Well, she tries, as usual, to dispute what I say or refute it. So she says, thanks. I'm barely in green rooms because the players are typically in a separate LAN area, listen to this, to the rest of the broadcast team. So I'm not around that much. I think I worked 3 events in total with Thorin, 2 Star Ladders and 1 ESL. So she's sort of implied, I only worked 3 events with him. There's only been 1 event where I had a disagreement in a green room, and that was one of the aforementioned events. Yeah, that was ESL New York with me. I just straight up called her out for some of this bullshit to her face. And yeah, didn't like it, did she? I try and keep focused on the games and not say much, my lord, if only you fucking would. There'd be no problem then, love. So maybe my presence, yeah, just her presence, just existing as a woman as usual. All the shit she's done in this fucking video and did behind the scenes as well, and all the shenanigans she's pulled with other people's jobs and gotten jobs just for being a woman sometimes. Literally, I heard ESL once told a male interview / host, yeah, you can't have the gig, it has to be a woman, that's what the sponsor says. And as a result, it was Frankie that got that gig. She'll never mention that, by the way. No, it's just that she exists and her presence made some people unable to express their views. But I never acted like they couldn't. What a disingenuous fucking person this individual is. And here's the problem with that. In 2019, during I Am Katowice, I subtweeted her to actually not call her out directly and tag her. I said, because people were flaming her for her interviews, having a few like errors and being a little bit off with some of the context. I said, if you're an inexperienced interviewer in a game like Counter-Strike, by the way, this is before we even did ESL New York, where the fans are pretty hardcore, especially on Reddit, then I'd advise you ask the analysts in the green room as many questions as you can and take notes. Was an approach Smix took, which seemed effective. That's one of the reasons we love Smix. And she was a legend of the fucking game. She did so much homework. It was crazy. She used to do 10 times more homework than she ever was able to use in the questions. She's just a fucking legend. She has that Korean work ethic. It's actually incredible. I admire her a lot for it. Frankie goes, oh, hey, Duncan, this is before I blocked her. Is this about me? I do talk to the analyst desk. In fact, I wrote a blog post about it, if you'd like to read it. I also take notes, and you know this because we worked Star Series together. Wait a minute. I thought you're barely in green rooms. This is 2 years later, because the players are usually in a totally separate area from the broadcast, and so you're not around that much, and you only really worked 3 events with me. The story just bloody changes depending on what she wants it to fucking be and how she wants to present it. She has no relationship with the truth, or she just actively hates it, or maybe it's so post-one she doesn't think the truth exists. She gets to have her truth anytime she bloody wants. She just changes the memory and then that becomes reality and that was the truth that she was telling. Or she's just a fucking liar and a disingenuous person, right? Then how about this? Remember all that stuff about don't mention the women, use them as a shield. Don't mention your daughters. Stop using them as a shield and wielding them, the women, as excuses. She's tired of it. I have daughters. Remember all that? Well, you know what? When it was announced that the Savvy Gaming Group, owned by the Private and Public Investment Fund, owned by Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, was buying ESL and Face It, she put this tweet out there because people started calling her out over it, unsurprisingly. She put, just putting this out there super quick, 25th of January 2022. I'm on a break from esports hosting. My baby is less than 2 weeks old. I'm not currently working for any TO. I'm getting tweets about being a hypocrite, etc. already. You already admitted you're a hypocrite earlier for working with Games with Borders and Blasted in Bahrain. Now, you're already setting it up like, I'm not even working with them. I don't even work with them at the moment. And I have a baby. Okay. You might think, well, maybe the baby thing's just to do with the fact she's not doing esports hosting, right? Then down here, interestingly, to people asking me to speak out, do bear in mind, this is a done deal. As though there's no point speaking out if the deal's done, because obviously then you'd never be able to work with them. That's the implication, right? You should only do it before so you could stop the deal, but still work with them. Because remember, working the event she wants to is the most important thing to her, not her lives of her gay friends, the lives of gay people and women in Saudi Arabia, the lives of gay people around the world, people speaking out against LGBT, people using LGBTQ slurs. When it actually matters to get her job, if to get her job she has to ignore all that, that is what she has proven time and time again she will do, despite in the meantime trying to take credit for not having worked with them when she doesn't get the offers, and then also call them out and call them murderers and all the rest of it. But now, what would the point in calling them out be? It's a done deal. The PIF now own a majority stake in the ESL/Face It merger. Well, in that case, you'll never be working with them, right? It is not reversible like a sponsorship. MTG can't take the sale back. That doesn't mean people should not have their say and condemn this deal. Go ahead. But please be considerate towards people who have worked/work at ESL and Face It and don't know how they wish to react, if at all. Well, how fucking convenient. And don't worry, the daughters thing's going to come up again later too. Because then she published a blog. And here's the thing, guys. This blog was published on something like the 26th of January. So we're only talking, by the way, like a day later after the baby tweet. And it's called A Difficult Decision. And spoiler, you can already tell she's setting up to potentially work with them again. So we'll skip through some of this. You know, last week, my sleep-deprived self somehow managed to record and edit a video on a deadline while keeping a tiny child alive. She got a daughter, guys. Got bad results from the hospital and witnessed toilet water pour through our living room ceiling. In other words, I thought that was the week from hell. But it turns out it doesn't rain toilet water, it pours. Yes, the aforementioned sleep deprivation has rendered me even more insufferable. At least she can acknowledge she is insufferable. And can be quite insufferable too, by the way. When I was invited to a meeting with ESL, oh, this is going to be interesting, about some operational changes. This is so interesting. I thought it must be something impactful, given the meeting taking place. But I had no idea it would be a merger and the sale of the now ESL Faceit Group to the Savvy Gaming Group, SGG, which is owned by Saudi government's Public Investment Fund, PIF. In other words, the Saudi government, remember what she said earlier about governments, and if they own things and they set the laws, and that's why you can't work with them, Saudi government now owns the largest tournament organiser and 3 key brands, ESL, Faceit and DreamHack. She's also worked DreamHacks, I think. The increase in funding the company will receive will lead to better internal infrastructure and viewer experience in an industry that needs live events to bring in the revenue, or at least make efforts to break even. What are you talking about as a follow-up line? I was expecting you to call them out. No, what you essentially explain is that we need people like the Saudis to buy in. We need this kind of funding. It is well known that esports events are often a huge loss maker for tournament organisers. She's actually making the case for why we need this, why it's almost like a necessary evil, you might say. This is mental. She posted it on Twitter, and as you can imagine, people go mental. People are obviously making loads of comments, right? She says, because someone says, like, the problem is that Frankie immediately came into the scene and just randomly started calling people bigots and trying to get them fired. You could certainly say so, couldn't you? At the end of the day, it's kind of hard to live your life without compromising on your morals because of how supply chains and stuff work. But just coming into the scene and trying to get people fired for made-up reasons in your mind, then turning around and acting virtuous is shitty. I agree. By the way, if you're someone who's never called out any companies or anything like that, work wherever you want, mate. It's your choice. It's your private decision at that point in time. Someone could say, I don't like them, I don't like you working with them, but I won't call you out. If you call other people out for stuff, and especially minor stuff, then yeah, you're going to get absolutely fucking metaphorically tortured if you fucking do it. She then says, one other thing, this is BS bullshit. I actually don't typically name and shame people. She used it, by the way, she didn't name me, but she actually, well, it was so obvious, but she used an acceptance award speech to fucking call me out. In 2018, get ready for the way she phrased how disingenuous this is. In 2018, I called someone out for homophobic language and said, let's be better, right? That implies I used homophobic language. Not that I said there was an etymology that has changed over time and it doesn't only mean that. No, she called me out for homophobic language now. This is in 2022, she's saying this, after Saudis have bought ESL and Faceit and DreamHack. This is who this fucking person is. And all she does is double down and remain the virtuous one in the position of moral superiority, calling out other fucking people and deciding who can work and can't. I have never ever tried to have someone fired and have sought to be fair. By the way, there's a blog on her site where she talks about like the difficulties of being a woman in esports or something like that. And in it, she actually says, if you ever fucked with her, she makes sure you never see her Twitch stage when she worked at Twitch. So absolute lie there. You can prove it. You can go look it up yourself. I won't pull that one up. You can go and find it yourself for that one. She says, another clarification. I'm not directly involved in IEM as some seem to have reported. I won't be on the broadcast and I'm not being paid by ESL and have no plans to work for them. That sounds like you'll never work with them. She just means she doesn't currently have a plan to work with them. I just have to do a few social media posts because Predator sponsor IEM. No, you don't. You could go to them and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to break this contract on moral grounds. I won't in any context work with companies, even tangentially supporting them or in any way promoting them, that work with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because I believe their government are murderers and would murder my gay friends. And I have learned to be better and learned from the LEC staff. And basically I know I must do better and that we all must. And people like Thorin don't even call out their morals and what they do. So I'm doing that right now. No, she didn't do that. She thought she had to do it because you know why? I'm guessing because she had a baby. She wanted the money. Weird how that fucking works, isn't it? It's like there's a trolley experiment, except instead of like one guy and then 5 people tied to a track, and the track's going to go over the fucking 5, but if you pull the lever, it kills the 1. In this analogy, right, it's like there's a fucking bag of money currently stopping the people about to be killed. She goes, picks up the bag of money to allow the train to go through and kill, in this case, all of her gay friends, because she has a baby. I guess in that case, was the baby on the other track by her logic? It would starve, I'm assuming, is the analogy. What a fucked up scenario. She's even trying to argue her way out at this point in time, by the way, guys. Now, the next day on the same thread, someone says, as a female presenter, you know more than any CSGO player how male-dominated this business is. So first, thank you for your service to women in esports. This is going to age so poorly, esports girls club. Rainbow flag, all this. In layman terms, why would you consider walking away from the industry because of this buyout? She even implied she might have to leave the industry. Why does it matter? So let's see what she replies on the January the 22nd, 2022, 27th. Firstly, thank you, heart emoji. And secondly, because I'd be working for a company owned by the Saudi government, something I have spoken about not doing in the past. I hope there'll be other opportunities when I return from maternity leave, but I just don't know. By the way, she then went on to work with that government, the company owned by the Saudi government, who she said she had spoken about not doing, and about being better, and about learning from, and about learning and educating yourself not to work with people who would kill your gay friends. This is in April 26th, months later, after the January thing, and she's explaining that this is what she wrote when the deal was announced, basically. And then someone says, like, so will you be working with them? And she goes, thanks. I don't actually know. It's difficult because of the ownership, but I also need to financially support the family. So I have to wait for ESL to discuss it with me and then decide. In only like 3 months, suddenly she's gone through, she wasn't going to work with them. She said she won't work with them. She said in the past she won't work with them. I don't work with them. I do not work with these people. Stop saying I work with these people. Stop saying I'm a hypocrite too. I'll just have to talk to ESL about it and then decide, because I do need that money. You know, my daughter, my family. Like, remember, guys, leave out daughters. It's just about business. This is about principles and people, your gay friends that live in Saudi Arabia. What's going on here? Let's revisit that topic, shall we? And it turns out, actually, even in January on the 30th, someone had said something about Jesus. How can anyone, let alone yourself, take you seriously if you continue to work for them? Virtue signaling is unpleasant enough, but not even holding these virtues you claim to have, embarrassing. And she says, I don't call it having virtues, you do. I'm not currently working for them and don't have plans to. 3 months later, I'll have to decide. I also have a child to feed. She never bloody stops using that child as a shield, does she? That Blizzard guy's not allowed to, probably because he's a man, right? But she's allowed to do it all day long, and therefore have bigger priorities over whether you take me seriously or not. Oh no, it's not about whether he takes you seriously. It's about whether you care about people who aren't straight being executed in that country by the government that sets the laws, and you care about educating yourself to not work with people who would kill your gay friends. It's not about whether this guy likes your tweet or not. What an outrageous, disingenuous way to frame this conversation. Then what happens is, because I called her out, DK just goes, a legendary journalist in esports, very man of true integrity. He says, I shouldn't have to explain this. Oh no, what happened was, she just replies and says, DK, feel free to, he called people working and virtue signaling and them choosing to work with them classless. So she says, DK, feel free to get in touch if you'd like to talk to me about my plans. Then you can make a more informed decision about whether I'm classless or not. Well, now that we know what your plans were and you've executed on them, we know you are classless. And we know you never meant any of that. You just wanted to essentially squash this publicly so you could go on waiting to decide. And what decision did you make in the end? You chose money and a gig over your gay friends and everyone who's not straight in Saudi Arabia and women around the world. Yeah, that's what you did. Now, what's funny is he even just straight up says, I shouldn't have to explain this, but my tweet called the esports community classless. She's also got main character syndrome, so everything's about her. Nowhere did I say you were. Feel free to assume I did, though. I could not care less. She goes, that's a fair point, and I apologise for misreading. Oh, it's all she ever had to do towards me about my tweets, right? Unfortunately, I'm blocked by the original poster. This is in 2022. I told you guys, she blocked me years earlier than this, but she has the gall to say that. But when I'm posted about by them, I get sent screenshots. And while I know you don't care, sometimes I get upset. So it's all about her feelings still. Everything that's going on is just about how she feels, no matter what she's done or said to other people, about gay people, about governments and who she will or won't work with. It's just not usually in my character to be so public with it. I showed you her just popping out of nowhere to attack the Blizzard guy, to come and attack me over something with Frost scoring that she wasn't even tagged in any context. She's just a fucking liar, guys. And by the way, talk about her plans, she ends up working for them. Then don't worry, she continues to attack anyone else who dares to mention it, because Adam Fitch, a young, legit journalist with integrity, I think he's moved on from the industry now because sadly he got a bit jaded with it, I don't blame him. He goes, it's a shame to admit that the esports industry's collective silence regarding Saudi's acquisition of ESL and Faceit doesn't surprise me whatsoever. What do you know? Same tactic. She doesn't mind calling me out publicly, but everyone else is supposed to contact her in DM or WhatsApp or phone her. She goes, well, it'd be cool if you had spoken to me directly. Now he's not even allowed to bloody give his own opinions on his own Twitter account. He doesn't even name you. It's all about you, and he can't do that. He has to ask your permission to find out what's going on. I actually came out and said, I worked Bahrain and GWB. I called myself out first. Doesn't mean we can't, you idiot. You encourage people to call people out. You also wanted voices to be amplified, remember. I also wrote in my blog post what the difference is between a sponsorship and the buyout. Wait a minute. She's already changed the terms. Earlier, she said about how she wouldn't do it like working with the government and how the government sets the laws. It's not just about the people. It's not about working with them. She made mistakes and she wouldn't do it and she'd educate. But now suddenly it's because they haven't because literally Mohammed Al Bin Salman himself didn't just buy ESL directly. He bought it through the public investment fund, through Savvy Gaming, and then he bought it, and he's the head of Savvy Gaming, and it said in other articles he's hands-on, very involved. He's a 37-year-old gamer, apparently. But no, we're going to pretend there's enough abstraction here that you're not really. I mean, if they're just the shareholder, then what's the problem? Because in this case, you know they're the shareholder. Like I said, if someone bought into a fund and bought into my company, I couldn't know that. Whereas in your case, you absolutely know that's who it is. And just like All Blast and Neom and all the rest of it, you could take a stand against it. Just like Games Without Borders. I mean, that was direct, wasn't it? So, interesting now, we've already started to change it because, spoiler, you know where she's going towards the end of this video, guys. I don't deserve the constant criticism I've had, which isn't being directed to others. So apparently it's not just she doesn't deserve it, it's because everyone else isn't being called out. I mean, has everyone else done what you've done, Frankie? I don't think they have. She then goes on to say a bunch of other spurious reasons. Also, face it, we're a white label client for me. ESL were my client in multiple games. They produce Rainbow Six, Rocket League, and multiple other titles. So basically, well, I've worked with them all before, so, you know, the implication is, what does it matter if I keep working with them now, even though they're owned by people I'd say murder gay people, including my gay friends if they were there. Stop targeting me and go for the companies. Why didn't she just attack companies who hire me or who let me say my things then instead of me? I'm literally a single person, like me then. Just because I have followers doesn't mean I don't have feelings. She encouraged people to call me out and even said refreshingly that people were calling me out directly on my fucking Twitter account to me in replies. She doesn't give a fuck. She has no principles. This guy then just says, he wasn't targeting her. You were brought up, so I gave her thoughts. I think you're a good person, as I said. I also think the events as they played out look iffy in hindsight. She goes, but I haven't worked for ESL, Adam. She goes on to. The implication there, by the way, is that you won't. And the reason Thorin doesn't like me, read my mind, is because I once gave a speech where I referenced his defense of homophobic language in 2018. Now it's a defense again. Right, first of all, she said before she called me out for homophobic language. Now it's a defense of it, even though I actually explained, she says homophobic, that if it's in the context where it would be homophobic or against gay people, that it is unacceptable, and it is clear that it's unacceptable, definitely. I've already outlined that at the beginning of the video, but all those years later, 4 years later, she is still peddling different versions of the same lie by omission, the same disingenuous twisting of it, because that is who the fuck Frankie is, and when she is painted into a corner, she will do or say whatever it takes to try and win. And to try and paint herself as the victim or the hero. And if you research the facts, rather than just going by a tweet Thorin put out about GWB, Games Without Borders, making out I had worked with them post-Neom when I hadn't, you would have seen my tweets explaining about my past work before others called me on it. Let's go back to that tweet I made. Imagine working this event and then trying to lecture others online about your politics and what good behaviour is. Right? Where did I say, you called them out and then you worked this event? She doesn't look things up. She has a shit memory. I think she's just a liar and a disingenuous person. But at best, she's forgotten, and she, at minimum, owes me an apology for all these lies as well, right? Then there's this tweet she also made in response where Adam Fitz just said, you've been paid to work at ESL events. That's what I meant by working for ESL. I'm happy to make that distinction in the future if it's unclear. So she says, you made it sound like I've done something wrong. She's about to, guys, by her own definition. And I need to be called out when I haven't worked for them since the takeover. She's also implying, by the way, that she won't. And that's the cut-off date. Hence, there's nothing to even question or speculate about, right? You made it sound like Thorin's attacks on me were justified. No attack on Frankie is ever justified. Remember, you're just attacking women by her logic. The abuse I have experienced is not justified. Now it's abuse. Now we've abused her by calling her out publicly, like she called other people out, like she encouraged others to call people out. All the sorts of outrageous things. How many times she lied and mischaracterized me, as I've shown you in this fucking video. Now, this is one that's mainly for comedy, but it has a darker implication when you consider the timestamp. So what happened was, November 23rd, 2022, she says at CSGO, the CSGO account, we are having an Anubis summit ahead of ESL Impact. Wait a minute, you're going to work at ESL Impact? I'll get to that in a second. And we have decided we need cats on the map. Please and thank you. This guy goes, you realise people would kill them, right? Like chickens in the game. She goes, you don't fuck with cats, dude. Now, obviously, that's meant to be light-hearted and jovial. But the idea of, like, you know, people might kill the cats if you put them inside a video game. It's like, don't fuck with cats, though, mate. Wait a minute, she's working ESL Impact. What do you mean? What? Oh, no, what? What? No. ESL Impact's doing a global finals? Okay. She's surely not working it, right? ESL Impact, it's ESL. They're owned by Saudis. Someone goes, thought Frankie didn't work for people that would kill her friends. Remember, she cares about people killing cats in a video game, but in real life, killing her friends. Hypocrisy at its finest. My tweet said we. The industry went in a direction I could not control. So by we, she was speaking on behalf of everyone in the esports industry, but not specifically herself. How many times did I just show you in this video? She said she'd made mistakes. She wouldn't do that again. It's something she wouldn't do again. You shouldn't do it because that's a company owned by the Saudi government. Governments control the laws and they set the terms and they're the ones. And let's learn, guys, look up about which countries would kill people if you be straight. Holy shit, and now it was just a we and she's excluded herself from it. The industry went in a direction I could not control towards working with people you say would kill your gay friends. Sounds like you can't work in the industry, love. I've put my money where my mouth is. I've turned down the millions of dollars. I don't work with ESL. Why can't you? Oh, that's right, because you have that daughter that you have as a fucking shield right against all this bullshit. So when someone does die for being gay in that country, if that is indeed what happens by your words, just send them a message before they die and say, sorry, I can't help you or speak out. But by the way, I have a daughter and don't worry, she's being very well fed from my work at ESL Impact. Man, a fucking life. I have a mortgage and a child to keep fed and warm. Great, the daughter's a shield again, mentioning the daughter every fucking time. And what do you know? Do gay people and women and LGBT people in Saudi Arabia and Middle Eastern countries, do they have children that they need to keep fed and warm? Do they themselves need to be kept fed and warm? Do they need to be kept safe and alive, do they? What the fuck is the implication? Esports gives me a degree of flexibility to be present but still earn. Go and do other work then. Go in the Dota 2. Go in the League of Legends. Go in the fucking Rainbow Six and Rocket League and PUBG. You're one of the only people who can work them all. But no, you must work these events because you just decided you wanted to. You found a way. You sat there. You racked your brain for months and months and months and had convos with ESL. Eventually you just decided, fuck it, it's only tweets, right? What are they going to do? I'll just do it and go against everything I just said and everything I called people out for. And all those years early in 2018, I said about how the language was unacceptable. I'll work with people I think kill actual gay people for being gay. What are you defending in that context? And then saying that they're necessary in the industry and that events need big funding, etc. And I was just the shareholder. My God, you're fucking disgusting by your own logic. You have no principles. That's why I said profits before principles is your fucking charity event, love. I'm working with the same people as before. That's irrelevant. It's about who owns them and funds them. But yes, the shareholder is different. Fuck you. Tell the gay person who's going to get killed that. That's just that the shareholder's different, so it's cool now. It's no problem. Was that the problem with LEC? If it'd been bought by the Saudis, should they not have quit? Should they go, oh, well, just it was going to be a sponsorship with the shareholder. Well, what can I do? Well, come on in. Oh, you even interview people from those countries, by the way. But it's just a shareholder, right? Why are you interviewing them? Then we go to this beautiful one. I'm not planning in working in certain places, and I'm not working on shows with sponsors I do not agree with. I had to decide on a line and do what is right for my family. The internet doesn't get a say in that. So first of all, she's not planning on working in. Before it was in or with countries. With. Now it's just in. So essentially she won't go to the country anymore. That's it. Before it was like you can't even work with them in any context. Blast was online, by the way. Can't work with them in any context because they kill your gay friends. Now it's like, well, look, I'll work with them and I'll take money that does come through them as the shareholder and the owner. But it's the same people I'm working with, though, who pass me the money. And I'll do all of that and go against everything I've said. But I tell you what, I won't bloody go to their country. It's irrelevant. As you've talked about with Neom, you're essentially helping tourism for their country. You are helping them esports wash events. You're helping them esports wash women's fucking events. For Lord's sake, knowing how they treat women in their country by your own logic. This is mental. And what's the reason why? It's because it's just if they're sponsors that you don't agree with. They can own the whole company, but if they sponsor it, that's the problem. What a disingenuous fucking line. I had to decide a line to draw because I still wanted to make money, it may as well say. But she goes, what is right for my family? Her family is the fucking shield again. By the way, when she keeps saying family, is there a reason her husband can't work? Doing honest days work and just not have to work. She doesn't have to work with murderers. It's all about her family. It's not even just a child now. It's her family now. The internet doesn't get a say in that. Well, my God, you get a say in fucking everything, don't you? You're using acceptance award speeches to call motherfuckers out instead of just talking about your own career and being the president of the year, you fucking idiot. And then this guy says it right. He goes, it's great to virtue signal, but once it hurts in the wallet, ... And everyone just realises she's full of shit, don't they? Then are you ready? The glorious punchline of the video. There she is. There she is. ESL Impact Season 2. Let's just fucking look at this. She's working for them. Oh, ESL arranges it. What do you know? ESL working for the Saudis. The government that does that shit. It's Frankie is back. The Rebel Alliance is back. But they've sold out to Darth Vader and Lando Calrissian here. Frankie just says, you watch out because Vader might change the terms of the deal. She's set her line in the sand of what she's going to do. Just going to give up those coordinates to the fucking planet moon of Endor or whatever the fuck that story was. There she is, hosting the event, right back to working with the old Saudis again. And what's it that she's working on here? ESL Impact Season 2. A non-male fucking tournament. The fucking gall of this woman. The context is so disgusting in light of the things she said if you go back in this video. What an absolute fucking clown. And because it's a women's event, you're helping them esports wash their treatment of women by seemingly doing a good thing for women. I noticed that never applied to my mate Carlos. All the great things he did for women didn't cancel out doing a tweet with someone you think is horrible to women. Not even him himself saying anything horrible about women at the time. Then how about this? If you think she stopped virtue signaling, you don't know Frankie Ward. This is how fucking ridiculous she is as a human being. So in this year, remember that event was in November of 2022, only 4 years or so after she worked with me at Star Series and had called me out like 4 years and 3 months earlier or 2 months earlier. Are you ready? There's a thread that she starts and she goes, you think it's hard being a woman in esports? Try taking time to have a baby. So not only is she using a baby again as something incredibly hard, in this year, in 2023, she's going, think it's hard being a woman in esports? Do you think it's hard being a woman in Saudi Arabia, Frankie, or Bahrain? Do you think it's hard being a gay woman in those countries? I tell you what, they should try bloody being a woman in esports, right? And having a baby, which some of them won't get to do because by your logic, they'll be killed. So, I mean, for you, maybe that makes their life easier, presumably, right? And then a guy called her out in a comment that doesn't exist anymore, and she dumps on him using her own hypocrisy. She goes, Twitter is part owned by Saudi. Find yourself a cleaner moral high ground to berate me from. She's implying, because he replied to her, calling her out for hypocrisy, on Twitter.com, which is owned by the Saudis. That makes him a hypocrite. Because in this, she's trying to imply like there's a moral equivalence between her working for them and taking money from Saudi Arabia while representing a women's organisation and having called them out as murderers. Him just using Twitter to contact her is like he doesn't have the moral high ground. She still maintains the moral high ground, or at least an even grounds, because Twitter's owned by Saudi Arabia. This is such a fucking shameless human being. But let me guess, that's just because her presence is what's making me feel she's just existing as a woman. Oh, don't worry, that wasn't it. She kept working for them after that too. After that, she then worked with them at Impact this year in February of 2023, ESL Impact, another event funded by ESL, the Saudis. There she is, another women's tournament. What's more, Gamers Without Borders now, she didn't work at that one in 2023, but little detail for you. Interesting thing you might want to notice. Let's just have a look what the setup is for Gamers Without Borders. So it's run by ESL. The safest there, the ones that the Faisal guy that she interviewed, and it's still sponsored by the Saudi Ministry of Sport. So let me just get this straight. ESL still runs Gamers Without Borders and has that same connection that she couldn't ever work with them again from. And she works with ESL. Can you see the game that's being played here, guys? Apparently they can do anything they want as long as she isn't at the event they're at. And then she can still work with them, but their actions don't somehow reflect over. Again, just ask yourself about that Carlos situation. Does that seem reasonable? But no, that's not it though, guys. There's still something else here. Still something else. Still something else here. And by the way, since it's Games Without Borders and they're actually having a female-only tournament, since she's not working it, does she use her voice to call out how women are treated in Saudi Arabia? Is she speaking up for them, is she? Is she learning to amplify voices? Well, it's more interesting than that, guys, because you might notice the month I actually did this video in. It's a certain month that was very relevant to that LEC Neon deal thing that I referenced earlier. But here's the interesting part. There's another ESL Impact event she's working, ESL Impact Season 3. She's the host. Hasn't happened yet. And let's just look when it is. So it's taking place in Dallas, Texas, in America, run by ESL. Wait a minute. What date's that? It starts on the 2nd of June. The month is June when it's taking place. Frankie is working an event that Esports washes the treatment of women and I think non-binary and trans people, so counting the LGBTQ+, the whole thing that this was all about. In the month of June, she's helping them esports wash and working for them to get money for her family, and because they're just a shareholder, and besides that, you know, she called herself out for being a hypocrite before, so no one else can all that, and stop saying she's a hypocrite, and stop saying she's going to work with them. She hasn't worked with them yet. She said she won't work with them, and then she'll have to decide, and now she's working with them, but she's only working with them because esports needs the money, and she's even going to work for them in that month. This is one of the most shameless fucking, the absolute gall of this woman. Who the fuck does she think she is? It's outrageous. And by the way, in the meantime, in 2019, she worked on LEC Spring. She appeared as a guest, and she's appeared since, and she worked on MSI. Now, by the way, by her own logic, when she works with Riot Games, she is approving or co-signing or supporting their treatment of women. Because when Riot famously mistreated women and had a massive lawsuit that they settled, doesn't she have women that are friends as well? When they settled it, so it was never gone through, and they never got a full punishment, they just agreed to settle it, and they, in other words, pay them off for what they did. Nobody in Riot was ever punished or shamed publicly. Nobody stepped down or was fired. Hence, no actual behaviour beyond throwing money at a problem, something Frankie seems to think is the fucking solution, as long as she's the one getting the money thrown at from as the scenario. Doesn't have a problem working with them. Fine, work with Riot Games, right? You know the saddest thing about all this? Frankie's actually pretty good at her job. In certain senses, she's excellent. I think at loser/exit interviews, there's nobody else I would choose. Despite what plebs might think on the LEC, oh, you got too hard on young Customer Rex. They were shit. She deserved to make him answer why it's okay for those players to play that way. Dota 2 at the TI, oh, how dare you ask him? That was so rude. You're idiots. I actually wanted there finally to be a bit of spice in fucking Dota, to really get some of these mega entitled pros who make $1 billion and didn't do well at TI to actually answer what was going on and what went wrong, and not just have the whole fucking community and talent and broadcast not just fillet them constantly. She does an excellent job. Also, she's literally friends with Richard Lewis. She's been on the No Majors Club. She's met me a number of times. So by the way, that even totally implies she could absolutely just a back channel through him or set up a meeting or something. She could have done all sorts of things if you ever want to squash this beef. I even actually told her at one point in time in 2019, maybe we can just forget about all that stuff and start over. But she couldn't let it lie. She had to attack me over the Frostgoring thing separately. She had to think that she couldn't be called out for the Games Without Borders thing. Then she had to malign me, say I used homophobic language. She did all sorts of fucked up shit, and she still does it to this day. So you know what? You have behaved way worse than I ever have, because you had to lie and twist what I did to even make it seem fucking bad. She isn't someone, if she even left all this shit out, I actually think I could have been a friend to this person, because I think she's excellent at her job. I would have been a staunch defender, just like I was of Frostgoring and other people in the industry when people attacked them. But now, fuck that. Fuck that noise. I actually think if she stopped, by the way, doing all the politics and calling people out, she can even be a lovely person and can be nice. But that side is just ruined completely. So let me just do what she did. I'll show you how emotional manipulation works, Frankie. I'll show you how you set up a story and it makes the other person sound so fucking terrible. So I was a little autistic kid. I'll never take that as I was a victim. This is just a fact of who I am. Who grew up in the northeast of England where there wasn't even esports. It was all in London down south. I didn't have the money to even get a train down south. If I went there, where am I going to stay? The cheapest hostel ever, basically. I started to go to events. I had to be so good that I actually got hired, not only to travel to London instead of hiring a guy from London, then to go to America and other countries. I'd be so good, I had to be better than people already in those countries that cost way less to send. And I did it. And after 10 years or so of doing like $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year, $15,000 a year. I finally broke through. I started to make $35,000, $40,000 a year. Suddenly, my dream job in my industry was coming true. I was 14, 15 years deep as a pro at this point in time. And then I got to the point I had all this success and I had a platform and I could do all these amazing things. The dream industry I'd worked through from a boy since I'd seen fucking Games Master that you got to host later. Not me, you. You got to host that because you're a TV presenter, right? Along came this woman I've never met or talked to and accuses me of bigotry openly and maligns and totally misinterprets what I've said, mischaracterizes it on purpose, encourages people to call me out, calls it refreshing, then works with me and says nothing about it, is willing to take me publicly endorsing them, still say nothing about it, say that they'll reach out to me to talk about it, never does, later works events where I'm lovely to her and help her and put her at ease and give her some little techniques, then is super hypocritical, goes back to shitting on me, goes back to calling me out, blocks me, says that because I've blocked her, that means that like she can't respond and how fucked up this is, and has now thrown so many fucking temper tantrums because she was justifiably, factually, and reliably called out for being a hypocritical, two-faced piece of shit. What about your gay friends in Saudi Arabia now, Frankie? Where I come from in England, people will often say, oh yeah, you and whose army? Well, I'll tell you what, I've got my own army backing me up. They're called the Skrilluminati. Thank you to Ahmed Hadjou, Joseph Adcock, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Theogony, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Jensen Goh, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Thooorin, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want teasers, find out who's in the upcoming interviews? Do you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Maybe you want to be part of those long discussions where we talk about anything and everything in esports. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and enlist today in the Skrilluminati via the Patreon link in the box below.